It's Friday and time for our last post-keynote chat from Øredev 2023. Today I talk to Diana Larsen about leadership, how to lead well in various circumstances, how to build better teams, and a lot more. Links to Diana's keynote and other things we talk about are of course in the show notes. Consider this chat a great appetizer if you haven't seen the keynote yet. Enjoy, and thanks a lot for listening. So welcome to the smaller stage, Diana.
Thank you. The shared stage. I really like these better.
Yeah. It's
collaboration, you know.
And thank you for a great keynote about resilient teams.
Yeah. Absolutely my pleasure. Yeah.
It struck me, it feels like leadership, in the way it's discussed here, it's very much about really being a good teammate or colleague.
Right.
Just slightly more scaled up, perhaps.
Well, except leaders have a capability. I mean, we're all going back and forth at various times in our lives, being leaders and followers. Yeah. And part of being a leader is learning to be a good follower as well, and you know, go along when it's time, someone else's time to lead. But yeah, I think leadership is critically important, and you know. In the Agile world, at least, there's a lot of talk about servant leaders and, you know, all these, but not so much real description of what's happening and why it's happening. And that's why Tricia and I wrote the book. Because when we looked around, that's what we were seeing. And so we said, you know, there's got to be some support here. Yeah, because that was a thought I had as well. That feeling that people get promoted, and I kind of expected there to be some kind of introduction or onboarding or something. And now I don't know what's expected. What do I do? Right. And, I suspect that's pretty common. It's very common, and particularly and a lot of times if there is any expectation that's described, it's, well, now you've got to lead. You've got to motivate. You got to go motivate your team. You got to go. But no real understanding about what does it mean to create the kind of environment, the kind of work culture, the kind of physical culture, emotional atmosphere, whatever it is, that is going to enable people to do the work that we want them to do. We often somehow that gets lost in the shuffle. That there is a social engineering aspect to leadership, but it's a light touch, and it has to do with things like some transparency, but knowing when, for whatever reason, you cannot be transparent, how to handle that so that people don't feel just like they're in the dark. All those kinds of things. Shielding from some stuff. Right. Or a lot of stuff, I guess. In one way or another. Well, sometimes there's like legal implications or regulatory implications or whatever. And that higher up who was in a bad mood that day and said these 6 things, and they won't happen. And I guess often the thing you have to go by is the things that you've seen other leaders do. Right. And that's just tip of the iceberg. Well, and then making some judgment about that. Making a judgment call about that. Not judging them, but just saying that, I just saw somebody do this. Did that seem effective to me? Is that something I would want to do, or would I want to adjust that in some other way? How did that work out? Did the people that leadership was landed on, how did they react? Recently, I was working in an organization where there was a crisis, and the leader who had been working really hard at becoming a autonomy supportive kind of leader all of a sudden got some advice from somewhere that he should become a war leader. Right? And so started using that kind of language for work and started, and people were shocked because he'd been going the other direction, right?
Yeah.
And I just, and it actually did some damage in the organization.
Yeah.
Good people, not the people you would want to have leave.
No,
The really good people went out the door. It's like, oh, if this is what it's going to be like here, we don't want it. And so it had some really negative reactions to it. And so observing that and saying, I wonder what would have happened if he sort of stayed the course as the autonomous, supportive leader. How would he have behaved differently? How would he have done things differently if he knew that was going to be more effective? Yeah. And so, I don't know what lesson. I haven't talked to him since, so I have no idea what lessons he's learned from it. But
might find out.
Yeah, I may find out someday. Yeah.
Yeah. So say that I've heard this presentation. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. Got a lot of good ideas.
Oh, thank you.
I come back to work, and next week I get promoted.
Yeah.
And then I'm scared shitless, and then I forgot everything.
Right. Yeah.
So what's one thing I should grab onto to start with?
Well, there's the book. But besides that, I think, thinking about those the 4 C's are in the order they're in for a reason. I mean, we've got it kind of going around in a spiral. You got to keep coming back to them over and over again. But starting with the courage to say, this is, I'm not doing this way. No. I don't understand what this is.
Or I started this week.
Yeah. And I need to learn more about this and starting with that idea that it's your job to learn out loud, to allow people to see that learning is okay here, that it's good here, that it's expected to be helpful here. I would start there. Yeah.
Figure it out.
And if you've already got that solid, then go to compassion.
It never hurts to go to compassion.
Yeah.
You can move around in the circle.
Yeah, just kind of, you don't have to retouch all of them all the time. And we're humans, we forget, so we've got to keep refreshing ourselves. Yeah.
Another thing that I feel I hear pretty regular from someone who moves up one step or another is, it's hard to decide or figure out or be told what things to let go of as well.
Right.
You mentioned the classic keeping your fingers and everything and not really contributing.
Right. Yeah.
It's a difficult one because I guess part of it is fear of missing all the important information.
Yeah. But we can't know it all.
No.
I mean, none of us can. Yeah. So they've got to be easy on ourselves too. Yeah. Compassionate to ourselves too. Yeah. Yeah.
But still, I'm afraid I might be missing out on the information I had when I was part of the team.
Yeah. Right. Well, you will be.
Yeah.
I mean, the acceptance of that, and that the team is going to know more about some things than helps you know when it's time to sort of ask. I've a person that I think is very wise, and that I follow his blogs and things, that I met through a different community. His name is Chris Corrigan. Okay. And one of the things that he said that was very impactful to me, and that is everything we do for the team, taking care of them. We're going to do this for the team. Oh, we're not going to expect a team member to step up and lead the retrospective. I will always do it, right? Anything we do for the team is one less thing the team learns to do for themselves. Right? One less thing that they learn, that they get to grow, that they get to, right? And so then we work on creating a relationship when we rely on each other, trust each other to be truthful about what's going on. If we want to be a leader that learns about the mistakes or the issues when they're small and not when they've blown way up, then we have to develop that relationship. Yeah. We have to be able to say. And that doesn't mean that anybody needs to become a kind of a pushover as a leader. I mean, you still have to have your own integrity. Integrity, and you still have to stand your ground, but you do that in a caring way. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the better leaders I've had recently, I felt like what he did was handling all the special cases.
Yeah.
And everything else, everything that became more of a regular thing, came back to the team.
Yeah.
And then when something unexpected happened, I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
I'll put it over here.
Yeah.
He will handle it. And he will come back and he will say, these are the things we do.
Well, and with luck, he would take somebody from the team with him while he handled it so they could learn to do that. Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly.
But all those things that...
Here's who you talk to about that. Exactly. Here's where you go for that. Yeah.
Exactly. But the feeling was really that if something unexpected comes up, and either I don't know how to handle it or we don't have the bandwidth, I know I can put it over here.
It's got your back.
Yeah, exactly. It will be prioritized. It will come back.
Yeah.
And the useful things will come back to me.
Yeah, and one of the things that was happening there was he was demonstrating the confidence in the team that they could keep the routine things going. Right? While he was off doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah.
And that also gave him that room to actually do concrete stuff when he had the time.
Right.
I mean, he wasn't coding every day, but he could take one of those things and code and come back with them.
Right.
And then he didn't have to block anything.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Awesome.
I felt I got something to take with me from that as well.
That's great. Yeah.
I wrote down a lot of stuff while you were talking. If you answered. So.
Oh.
So, another thing, it feels like the leadership thing is sort of going on the side of everything else.
Right.
It's a little bit like, testing or other processes. We all know that it would be really good if we did more of this.
Right. Well, and so in the early days of Agile, there was a lot of talk about, we don't need no stinking managers, right? We're going to be self-organizing teams. And I knew that was doomed because I had been doing work in organizations, creating team-based work processes before. And that's one reason why the folks I met early on in the Agile community, we really bonded over that. And what I knew was that there was work in the organization that was largely invisible to the people on the front line that managers did that nobody on the front line wanted to do. I mean, who wants to go to the safety meetings or the supervisory trainings or, all those kinds of things, to know how things work in the organization, to know how to get things done in the organization, right? And exactly what you were saying, when something unexpected happens, how do we go take care of this? And so in 2004, before the Agile Retrospectives book came out, Esther and I wrote an article called "You're Still Needed," because managers were starting to push back against Agile because it was they felt like it was going to make them lose their jobs, which, self-preservation, right? And so we said, no. They don't know it yet, but the teams are going to need you. And there are some things that you do now that are going to be great. You keep doing those. There are other things where you're going to have to learn to do things a little differently, like trying to do individual performance reviews when people are working on a team. You're going to have to learn to assess the team and how they're doing their work, as opposed to individuals, because no one can get anything done without their teammates. And anybody who tells you, I'm the rock star, is suppressing everybody else's performance. We know that, right? So, this is an area that I've been thinking about and working with for a very long time, and I've seen a lot of the patterns in it, and where we need leaders to show up. And then, and Tricia, my co-author in the book, grew up through some wonderful startups where she ended up in executive roles, all, kind of by surprise, because the organization was small, and then it grew and whatever. And so she had a whole level of experience with that kind of pressure and those kinds of things that the folks at that level have to deal with that are invisible to the rest of the organization. So every time I hear somebody on a team say, well, what they don't do it, what do they do? Well, they have a different sight horizon. They're seeing different information. In some ways, they are shielding you from that. Some of it you'd like them to be transparent about. Some of them you really don't want to have to deal with. Exactly. And so you've got to work out that relationship about, what do you feel like you need to know, what do you not need to know, and so on.
I mean, so all that hidden information, is it... Do organizations manage to formalize that, or sort of? Well,
some do. Some do. Some are, smart enough to figure that out. But we all are in our job roles for a reason. There's some specialized things we need to do that other people don't know about, other teams don't know about, or other parts of the organization don't. And we rely on that. We rely on everybody working together to get their jobs done. And so when anybody gets too embroiled in trying to do somebody else's job, then there's a problem, right? So whether that's micromanaging or whether that's second guessing, it's like that. There's a mirror image there, right? Exactly. And so
that happens pretty easily as well. There's too much hidden information. I can sit there and wonder, is anyone taking care of this? And there actually are 3 people over here. But I didn't need to hear about that, so I missed it completely.
Right.
People are interesting and tricky.
Right. And the more we can have sort of cross-functional teams and those kinds of things, the better we understand each other's jobs. My former business partner and very valued colleague, James Shore, created something called the Agile Fluency Game. That is a really wonderful expression of what it's like to be on a software team for 2.5 years if you make it that far, right? It's like a simulate like a Settlers of Catan Euro game, all right? And he uses it with teams and in other ways. I tend to use it with leadership groups, and so not too long ago, some people invited me in, and we had leaders from all the different functions in the organization, and we created cross-functional table groups of teams, and we talked about, we played the game. Some tables didn't make it. Some people, we played it twice, actually. We did it once. We kind of debriefed how that went. We said, what do you want to try the next time? They did it again. And it's a great game. It's really fun. And at the end, I said, we were kind of going around the circle. There were probably about 25 people there. And I just said, so what's your takeaway from this? What are you doing? And so different people, engineering managers said, what they had to say. Yeah, this game really shows what it's like to be in, right? And different people said different things. And we got around to the vice president of sales. And he said, well, I'm still not convinced that this is what software development is like. But the one thing I know, I wish somebody could explain sales to the rest of you as well as this did, right? People want us to kind of know their challenges and know the things, the challenges they're facing, but I don't want to go be in sales.
No.
But I would like to know how to support. And one of the engineering managers spoke up and said, I am really interested in the challenges you face. I think it does have an effect on the work that we're doing. Yeah. And so they created a leadership connection. And she said, could we have coffee? Yeah. And just begin a conversation about how the teams can be more supportive of sales and what the teams need from sales as well. And that came out of that experience. Yeah. But so there do need to be those cross-functional connections made, because he was feeling very alone in the organization,
of course.
And misunderstood by everybody, you know. So those kinds of things I think are really important, that those, like I said at the end, start building your leadership networks in your organizations. That's the kind of thing I meant.
Yeah. Everything doesn't have to start with a meeting with a set group of people at a set time.
No.
Grabbing a coffee.
Yeah, I mean, and that was pre-pandemic, so everybody was in the same room, but it was, but those kinds of things happen. Yeah.
Another part that I thought of that felt like this sounds tricky to talk about is power dynamics.
The power dynamics.
Which is extremely important and affects everyone.
Right.
But that must be hard for people to talk about.
It's harder for people to perceive because we don't really talk about it much. We don't acknowledge that it's present.
Yeah.
We like to pretend we're all equals, and we are all equals on one level, right?
Yeah.
On another level, we have different access to different information. There are areas where I can take actions and you can't take actions, and or where decisions I make are going to affect your life, and that kind of thing. And so we need to be clearer about what that is. There was a team that during the pandemic, a remote team, and they were trying to figure out when they were going to have their daily stand-up, their daily meeting, right? It wasn't a stand-up anymore, because everybody's in front of their computer at home. But and there were like 8 this is a U.S.-based team, and there were 5 people in Boston, and 3 of them were senior engineers, and there were a couple of and then there were 2 or 3 people in Colorado, right? So because there were more of them there, the people in Boston just said, "Oh, well, we'll have our meetings at 8 in the morning or 7 in the morning, something like that." And the people in Colorado said, "We have kids. We're 2 hours later. We can't. That's not going to work." No. But the dominant group, because there were more of them, and this is just geography, majority and minority. Said, "Oh, well, but we got to get started early, and so this is when we're going to meet." So the power dynamic there of there's just more of us, so we can make this happen, created all kinds of resentment, all kinds of hardships for some of their teammates. It impacted their whole team's ability to get things done because it wasn't acknowledged. And the people in Colorado tried to bring it up, but they got their voices just, they were just shouted down. And that's where that kind of power dynamic is not working for good, right? Is getting in the way of the team's best work. Just because, exactly. Right? And so those are the kinds of things that is a power play, and we need to understand that that's what that is, and then say, is that really how we want to work together? Or do we want to? How else could we make this kind of decision that would be more equitable for everybody on the team? That kind of thing.
I guess that's one of the situations where, in some places, it feels least scary to bring in someone external who talks about how we should do things, and then they go away, and then things keep.
And another example of that is the what we call the unknown power. Some power is at play here. We don't know where it's coming from. Somehow these decisions are made, and it's kind of invisible to us, right? I don't know if you know, but there's a retrospective activity that we call Circles and Soup, and it's about what does the team control, and where does the team have influence, and where does the team not have influence? They're just, that's the soup, You're just in the soup. It might be a potato going by. You don't get to choose. You just, So out of that, what you do is you identify what kind of action you can take. So if it's an unknown power source, well, we can't take direct action. What the team controls, we can take direct action. What we influence, we can make some recommendations, we can do some persuasion, but when it's in the soup, all we can do is choose our response. And that's how we start mitigating the power there. And so we learn that, So those are the kinds of things that we learn when we're talking about power dynamics.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. Recognizing your limits. So
it's
a very important part as well.
Yeah, right.
This stuff is outside. Another thing, it took me a while to realize, but I realized when you said team and talking about teams and resilience and stuff like that, I automatically thought of my smallest team unit.
Yeah.
And it took me a while before it dawned on me, the team is also the engineering department and the organization and things like that.
In general, we think about teams being smaller, but now we're doing more as we do more team self-selection, like Sandy was talking about, or our Heidi Helfand who talks about dynamic reteaming. There's some amazing work being done out there by some folks called fluid scaling technology, which is people changing the team they're working with like every other day, like on a 2-day cycle. We're going to get together, we're going to work on this little piece of work for 2 days, and then we're going to come back together and decide if we're still the right people to be working on that. And that might be quite a large, what they call the collective, is coming together and making those decisions on an every other day basis. The more we start experimenting with these different forms of teaming, and the more we define what that looks like in different organizations for different work, then be guided by that, I think it's going to be a really interesting path that we're heading down. Because for a long time we've been, Scrum is 7 plus or minus 2, And, I know some really strong 3-person teams. 2 people is a pair. So that's But there are some strong 3-person, especially in mobs. When people are doing mob programming, 3 or 4 people is very common. And so what's the best way to get the work done?
But that's what I realized after a while. That's my smallest team, so to speak, parts of it have changed relatively frequently. And for one thing, it feels like it has been refreshing and not actually a problem. And I thought, that doesn't seem very resilient. But then I realized that we're building on a slightly larger level, where I and the people who have been switching around, we are on some level a team that's sort of growing. And
you need to be having some of the same context.
Exactly. And that feels very helpful.
Right.
So I don't feel as precious about my smallest team anymore as I maybe did when we started talking about it. And because we were discussing it as if that unit would be as static as possible. And all the good things that could lead to. And then that didn't pan out with how we actually needed to work.
Right.
But how we actually needed to work turned out to work pretty well. So that
I'm a big believer that that we examine the nature of the work, even as it changes, to decide how we're going to organize ourselves to do the work. And that can have any number of different configurations.
It's very exciting. Thank you so much for taking time to talk.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Tack för att just du lyssnar på Kodsnack. Om du vill stödja oss, varför inte tipsa en bekant om podden? Eller lämna en recension i till exempel iTunes eller något annat ställe där det går att sätta betyg på poddar. Du kan också stödja oss genom att köpa oss en kopp kaffe på Coffee. ko-fi.com/kodsnack. Alla pengar går direkt till att göra podden bättre och trevligare. Du kan också komma och hänga i vår Slack-kanal. Länk finns på kodsnack.se, precis som alla andra länkar och all annan info kopplat till varje avsnitt. Sist men inte minst finns det också en länk till vår Spreadshop-butik där du kan köpa tröjor och andra prylar med Kodsnack-tryck. Återigen, tusen tack för att du lyssnar. Vi hörs.
Let me put it this way, Mr. Raymer. The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information. We are all, by any practical definition of the words, foolproof and incapable of error.